Hey, David. We have a bunch of people in the waiting room. I'm just waiting for the time to start before we let them in.
Gotcha. Thank you. Excuse me.
Okay, I see Karina.
Hi, Sandy.
Hey, Audrey. Hey, Karina. We've got a bunch of people in the waiting room, just admitting our little team first.
Okay, great.
All right, we've already got 25 people. All right, I'm going to go ahead and allow everybody in, and then I'll go ahead and kick us off and run through some quick logistics and then turn it over to you, David and Pat. Great. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining. It looks like we have a few people sort of trickling in over the next minute or so. So I'm going to wait for just a short minute and then we'll get started. Okay. Okay, terrific. Well, thank you everyone for joining. I'm hoping you can see my screen. Great. Well, thank you for joining for today's discussion on the EECBG program. I'm Sandy Fazeli with the National Association of State Energy Officials. I'd like to thank our partners as well with E for the Future for joining and helping us develop this programming. Just to walk through some brief meeting logistics. So we will be recording the meeting and posting it on NASEO's Infrastructure Hub. We also encourage a lot of discussion and contributions, whether through the chat or through raising your hand and speaking verbally during the course of the meeting. So please feel welcome to do so. Although we do ask that everybody's microphone remain muted until it's your turn to speak. And of course, we'll pause for questions and comments along the way. So again, feel free to use the chat or the raise hand feature. Just to walk through today's agenda, we'll start with some introductory remarks from NASEO and E4 leadership. Then we'll do a brief presentation on what we know so far about EECBG under the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and what we hope maybe states can take away over the course of the next few months while we gear up for the funding to arrive. And then Eric Kaufman, who is the Director of Energy Programs at the Maryland Energy Administration, has very kindly offered to share some insights and perspectives with us, both from his time in the Maryland state government, but also during his previous experience with Montgomery County in Maryland. And then we have some discussion questions teed up for you. Again, we're really interested in hearing about what you're hoping to learn about EECBG over the coming months and how we can help unpack that. So with that, I will turn it over to David and Pat to share some opening remarks.
Thank you, Sandy, and appreciate everybody being here today, both the states and also some of the local government partners that have joined, and other NASEO affiliates and colleagues are on. And a special big thanks to E for the Future. Pat Stanton and the entire E4 team have been tremendous to work with, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few moments. And also just want to shout out to those of you that are on the call today that maybe have some experience with the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant Program. People like Eric, who will be speaking later, who we rely on greatly for advice, among some of the other members we have that have worked in this area. I think just very briefly to mention for folks for background, this program was first authorized and used during the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act in 2008. And a number of NASEO members have experience at that time, but what we found was it was a great opportunity to build relationships, better relationships with local government to achieve more things, to help give them some resources. The dollars this time around, only the second time it's ever been funded, are more modest than during the Recovery Act. So those are challenges in and of themselves, but many of the things are similar. Coming up with things that will fit many local governments, streamlined assistance, a basic understanding of just what the program is and how it works, a basic understanding of some of those federal requirements that are so tricky, like Davis-Bacon and Buy American and so on and so forth. Those are the kinds of things we want to cover in a series of these workshop webinars that we're doing with E for the Future and the states and our local government partners that we hope build on one another just to better inform everyone. We'll have a lot of time for more questions later in the session, but I did want to point out also that we're doing our best to give the best guidance we can, partly based on our past experience with EECBG, partly based on the statute itself, which is pretty clear. But there are some items that we don't know yet, and the Department of Energy doesn't know yet, doesn't know the answer to. So we're going to do our best to guide you in the general direction, which we think is really helpful and foundational, but obviously more details are to come on all of those. I think the other thing I just mentioned is that we've been working very closely, really in lockstep with E for the Future and a group of state energy offices, some experienced in this area, some not, to develop model programs, projects, approaches that may be useful to others. And we'll talk more about those later, but I just wanted to note that this is something we've been working on for a number of months, and without Pat and Karina and Andrew and Audrey and others from E4, I don't think we would have been able to do this. So really again, and I'm gonna turn it to Pat to kick us off further. Thank you, Pat.
Oh, thank you so much, David, for the kind words. And as a former alum of a state energy office, I understand a lot of the issues, at least from scope and scale. So I'm hoping that our team will be able to assist in providing tools and resources to the energy offices. We're really pleased to be able to do this work. And I know my team and I are very interested in hearing your concerns and priorities and make sure that we are prioritizing providing tools that meet the real concerns you have. And so with that, I'll turn it back to Sandy.
Thank you, Pat. And thank you, David, for the opening remarks. So next up, we'd like to walk through some of the basics that we know about so far about the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant Program, as well as what we know about IIJA, and also what we've learned from the ARA era EECBG program as well. So I'm going to do my best to share the correct screen this time. Please bear with me. Hopefully that's right. Great. Wonderful. So this is just a quick snapshot of the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant under IIJA. What we found is that there is $550 million total in funding, and the state portion is $154 million. IIJA also added a new financing option under EECBG, which we will describe later. And what we know so far in terms of the timing of the funds, guidance from the White House released earlier this year predicted the funding will be released in fall of 2022. And of course, without DOE guidance, we are not completely aware of what the specifics of the program will look like, but we do know some of the overall contours of the program. And we think that there's a lot of runway and hopefully a lot of opportunity for states to start thinking about ways to engage local government partners and potential areas of alignment between the state and local levels. Well, I'm just having a lot of bad luck. Okay, great. The Energy Independence and Security Act of 2007 is the statute that originally established the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant Program. So this slide just shows some of the language that was used to establish the program and establish its purpose, which was first to reduce fossil fuel emissions created as a result of activities within the jurisdictions of eligible entities in a manner that is environmentally sustainable and maximizes benefits for local and regional communities. And second, to reduce the total energy use of the eligible entities. And third, to improve energy efficiency in transportation, buildings, and other appropriate sectors. ESA 2007 also laid out the allocation and the distribution of funds. We know that this program goes out to both state and local and tribal entities. So 68% goes to local governments. 34% of that is for local governments according to their population, so larger local governments. And then the other half, 34% for local governments based on their daytime populations or other factors, such as square foot of commercial or industrial space. 28% of the overall funds go to the state level. No less than 1.25% will go to each state. And then the remainder will be divided among states based on the population or another formula to be determined by DOE. ESA 2007 also states that states must regrant at least 60% of their allocations to units of local government that are not eligible already for the 68% listed above. And up to 10% of the state allocation can be used for administrative expenses. 2% of EECBG funds go to tribes. DOE is to establish a formula for the tribal component. And then the remaining 2% can be used for competitive grants to be run by DOE, either for individual units of local government or for consortia of local governments. And again, the priority there is for states with populations of less than 2 million or the greatest opportunity for energy efficiency or reduction in fossil fuel use. ESA 2007 also discusses the uses of the funds. I won't list all of them, but I think a few that are interesting and notable for states. The development and implementation of energy conservation strategies, building energy audits, energy efficiency retrofits, landfill greenhouse gas emissions reductions, street lighting, which we know Eric in Maryland just wrapped up a project on that front, renewable energy in government buildings, financing. So it's quite a flexible program in terms of the uses. And then finally, just to highlight the most recent change to IIJA, under IIJA to EECBG, obviously providing the funding, but also amending ESA 2007 to add financing programs to the mix. So these are for energy efficiency, renewable energy, and zero emission transportation projects and programs. And so that could include loan programs, performance contracting, rebates, grants, or other incentives. So again, quite a bit of flexibility and potential overlap with existing financing and financial incentive programs that states have. So next I'll turn it over to Audrey Bragg with E for the Future to talk a little bit about lessons learned from ARA.
Great, thanks, Sandy. Can you hear me all right?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So I'll be covering, as she said, what happened under ARA. And under the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, $787 billion in stimulus, including federal tax cuts, expansion of unemployment benefits and other social welfare provisions, and domestic spending in education, healthcare, and infrastructure, including the energy sector. And as part of that money awarded to the energy sector, ARA provided funds to the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant, or EECBG, as we've just been talking about. And it provided funds to state, local, tribal, and territorial governments. These funds were used to develop and implement projects that improve energy efficiency and reduce energy use and fossil fuel emissions in their communities. More than $2.7 billion was distributed through formula grants to just over 2,100 cities, counties, states, territories, and Indian tribes across a range of 14 broad program areas. The grants funded over 7,400 individual programs, projects, and activities. And let's go to the next slide, please. EECBG recipients under ARA were required to submit a plan to the Office of Weatherization and Intergovernmental Programs in the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy at the Department of Energy, which I'm happy I said it all, but it's WIP to EERE to DOE. It's a mouthful of acronyms. So every plan was reviewed by a team from EERE, and if approved, it would then be forwarded to an EPA officer for compliance review and approval. After receiving this initial approval, grantees were monitored by the EERE with their standard periodic desktop monitoring practices, and the desktop monitoring examines grantee reports to assess progress and determine compliance with the federal rules and regulations, the goals and objectives of the grant as stipulated in the approved plan, and the reporting and fiscal tracking of resources expanded by the grantees and its subgrantees. Grantees also were required to comply with any reporting requirements that were mandated by ARA, such as the National Historical Preservation Act and the wage requirements as spelled out under the Davis-Bacon Act. Go to the next slide. Grants could be used for a range of initiatives, including energy efficiency building retrofits, financial incentives for energy efficiency, building code support, renewable energy installations, distributed energy technologies, transportation activities, recycling and waste management efforts, and other activities approved by the Department of Energy. Grants were provided directly to local government entities, state agencies, and Indian tribes. About 70% of the grants funding went directly to local governments, with nearly all of the remainder, about 28%, going to the states. States receiving EECBG funds were obligated to disperse a minimum of 60% of those funds to local entities in indirect grants. And you'll see from this long list that the first 6 broad program areas highlighted in bold, they represent the top 80% of the dollars spent under EECBG and about 74% of the total number of activities. Next slide. The Department of Energy hired DNVGL with supervision by the Oak Ridge National Laboratory to evaluate the impact of the $2.7 billion that was dispersed to the 2,100 jurisdictions. And this evaluation focused on those 6 broad program areas, which was like highlighted on the last slide. And these, just as a refresh, they were the energy efficiency retrofits, financial incentives, including loans, rebates, financing, thank you, buildings and facilities, which include architecture, design, and engineering activities, lighting, both traffic and street lighting retrofits, and then energy efficiency and conservation strategy. So these are projects covering a wide range of efficiency and renewable energy technologies. The primary metrics developed by the evaluation included energy savings and renewable energy generation, labor impacts, the avoided carbon emissions, bill savings, and cost effectiveness. And I think it's really important to note that these metrics were decided after the fact. They were not considered during the planning and implementation of the project. So something that we're hoping that we will have the metrics on the front end as we're developing projects, so we get the results that we want. So of those 4 main metrics, the energy impacts program totaled energy saving was 409 million MMBTUs, and 57% of the savings was attributed to the financial incentives, with 17% of the savings associated with both energy efficiency retrofits and lighting. There were nearly 63,000 job years created by the program, and the energy efficiency retrofits led with job creation of over 31,000 jobs. The total avoided carbon emissions were 25.7 million metric tons of carbon equivalent, with the vast majority derived from energy savings. The avoided social cost of carbon for the program totaled 1.78 billion. In the total lifetime program, bill savings was 5.2 billion, with financial incentives, lighting, and energy efficiency retrofits accounting for the most savings. So this is just a little bit of context, and I will hand it back over to Sandy to discuss what we know and don't know about the EECBG program under ESHR versus ARA. Thanks.
Thanks, Audrey. So first, maybe some level setting about what we don't know yet. And again, this is because we haven't received guidance from the US Department of Energy about what the program will look like and sort of what the key priorities will be. So we don't really know how similar EECBG will be under the Infrastructure Act in relation to ARA. We don't know how much flexibility EECBG recipients will have in using their funds. We're expecting that it will be just as flexible as under ARA, but again, we can't make any assumptions. We also don't know the formulas that DOE will use to guide the sub-allocations for the state and local allocations. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Again, each state will receive at least 1.25%. But the specific allocations beyond that may change. And of course, any other programs, guidance, or strategies that DOE might use. All that being said, we still think that there are considerations and activities that state energy offices might want to think about now in the lead up to the release of the funds. Are there ways that you can communicate with local governments about their priorities and potential opportunities for collaboration? Are there existing programs within your state that might be suitable to receive EECBG funds? Are there ways to support smaller and less resourced local governments? We know sometimes they don't necessarily have the bandwidth for very deep project management and reporting, or necessarily the expertise needed to navigate some of these more complex projects. And of course, as David alluded to earlier, starting to understand some of the key provisions that are important under IIJA, such as Buy American, Davis-Bacon, and the reporting needs and gaps that exist. So just to tee up some of the future meetings that we're hoping to hold, we are hoping to organize discussions with different experts in these fields who can help answer your questions and also present on what the lay of the land looks like for the Infrastructure Act this year moving forward. So with that, we'd like to next turn it over to Eric Kaufman, again, Director of Energy Programs with the Maryland Energy Administration, to share some of his thoughts.
Thank you, Sandy. And I decided to dispense with a presentation and make this just an open and frank conversation. But as Sandy knows, I have my merit badge from the days of the American Recovery Act and the EECBG funds at the local level, and in recent years have joined the Maryland Energy Administration, which is the state energy office. And like many of you, we are eagerly awaiting more guidance on the requirements, how the funds are going to be split up. But now is the time to start conversation, knowing that we fully anticipate that many things will be very similar to what they were under the previous iteration. And this is a tremendous opportunity for state and local coordination. One of the things that I think, those years ago, during the implementation of EECBG round one was, created a great dialogue between the state and the local governments in terms of what the priorities were, what projects were going on, and frankly, some of the pilot projects that were implemented then led to local, state-funded programs. So it was a great opportunity to experiment a little bit. Now, the counterpoint to that is that these are challenging funds to comply with. Any federal funds are, and there's sort of always that mix of broad vision and practicality comes into play in terms of finding things that are very doable, where the reporting requirements can be can be where the functions have reporting that is sort of more streamlined. A lot of us will have to make some decisions between larger projects and working with local governments to do little larger projects versus more that may cover more sectors. One of my lessons learned when I was at the local level is we had I was with a formula grant county, and we had a large formula grant, and we divided it across over 11 programs, touching pretty much every sector and aspect of the community. and had great results. But it also, the combination of doing public-facing residential rebates, plus commercial, plus workforce training, plus education outreach, and all the sub-programs that derive from it, led to a very substantial compliance monitoring and reporting. And so that's one, that's one thing is sort of the lesson learned, is to look at, so start getting arms around the key priorities and where state and local priorities intersect early. The other aspect, I think, is going to be, we're eagerly hoping for some federal guidance on a number of items, and they include, if you look back at sort of, some of the more recent lessons learned, is that some of the biggest challenges were not energy related. They're getting the assistance to navigate the federal federal reporting compliance, getting guidance, in a time frame that allows action to be taken, issues related to Buy American, and being able to have clear guidelines as to what qualifies and what doesn't, and Davis-Bacon in terms of labor and pay rates. And those are pretty substantial, and they're not things many of us do day in, day out. And so that guidance was a challenge for us. I think those of us who've been through it have learned and can mentor others, but there's a lot of opportunities there to work with DOE and to streamline. The NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act requirements, can also be challenging when you start looking at waste disposal requirements, historic preservation, how that works with your historic office. Usually for us, it's the Maryland Historic Trust, and being able to build those relationships and the processes to seamlessly hand off reviews and things like that, for whether it's coming from a local entity or whether it's coming from the state funds. Those are relationships that I would highly recommend starting to build now. Most of them go by a prototype agreement that outlines the terms and the processes. We actually have already dusted ours off and already met with our state historic office recently, to start the process of how we can improve and what we learned. So would recommend looking at that sooner than later. The other item is just getting a clear consistency in how you're look at what a job is. In previous iteration of EECBG, the definition was not 100% clear, but I think we all found our way. But to be able to start to get your arms around what that is, because that's going to be something you're going to be likely reporting, depending on how the final guidelines come out. And then prioritizing. There's going to be lots of, one of the things, I've experienced both at the state and the local level is, as soon as there's money, there's going to be a flood of ideas. There are going to be many, many organizations reaching out to the state energy offices or local sustainability office, or however it's coordinated, but in whichever government, asking how the funds are going to be spent and proposing lots of ideas. And it comes as a flood. And we all want the most innovative ideas, but sometimes there's that little bit of practicality. I'll give you an example. So one of the programs that MEA implemented out of the previous Recovery Act was a state energy efficiency loan program, additional funding for our state energy efficiency loan program. And those funds were distributed. They did some great projects, but being a financing program, when the funds revolve back to the state, the federal character restarts as well. So the next revolution of the funds would have the same compliance requirements as the original chunk of funding. We're hoping this is an item that'll be certainly up for discussion, especially with the continued emphasis by DOE on financing programs. And we love financing programs, because if you finance something, a grant, you get an activity once. A financing program, you can benefit many over time. But there is the practicality of how you're going to do the monitoring, which can get extremely, extremely detailed. And so one of the things we did is we actually converted those funds as they come back into the agency in repayment, we converted them to grants. And so that was that was our, and they're still doing great projects, but I think that dialogue about how the reporting requirements are tied to financing and does once, whether it's a direct revolving loan where the funds are repaid, or whether it's a loan loss reserve, at what point does the federal character not apply? Is there a point they transition from being federal money to essentially still public funds, but state or local funds? And just in general, I would say that this is a good time as we start to get more guidance to start thinking about how the processes are going to work, leveraging what we've learned in the past. If you need consultant resources, now would be the time to start thinking about scopes and procurements to bring those resources on board to assist with the administration of these funds. And then the other element that would be also highly recommended is start talking to peer agencies. There often are other agencies that have the ability to help. They either have experienced these issues directly with other federal funds, or they have implemented projects that may be similar. You may have sort of a combined interest in a particular sector. And so those are, that is a critical item. And yeah, that's the short list of things to start thinking about and organizing. And, I think we're all looking forward to moving forward with some of these federal funds to implement some highly impactful projects. And the more we can work together to help each other and work with DOE to help clarify and streamline, the better we are all going to be and the more successful.
Thank you, Eric, so much. Those are really terrific insights. And I'm curious, from your seat in the Maryland Energy Administration, which works so much with local communities, are there specific project types that you think lend themselves particularly well to state and local cooperation, or any ideas that you think would sort of, get states sort of excited about different model projects that might be out there?
Absolutely. I mean, in the way we're structured now, we have a direct line to local governments. We have a number of programs such as our Maryland Smart Energy Communities programs that already interact with them on a day-in-day basis. So we're seeing what's in their sustainability and their energy plans, which gives us some great hints as to what their interests are. And I think the short list of what we're seeing or come up in early conversations are streetlights. They always are perceived as a low-hanging fruit, but sometimes they're slow to upgrade. And there may actually be other aspects of IIJA that apply to streetlights more broadly in some of the bigger utility portfolios. So we expect to see heightened demand. Fortunately, we, in partnership with NASEO and the Metropolitan Washington Council of Government as well, are in the process of wrapping up a federal grant where we actually looked at the whole streetlight ecosystem in Maryland. Who owned them, how many there were, what types they were, how related to efficiency, the ownership structures. And then we also provided direct technical support to local governments to be able to update their inventories and develop energy savings estimates. So that creates a fantastic opportunity of sort of almost pre-made projects. And they're relatively simple projects from a reporting perspective. So that's a great example. In addition, there's always a hunger for energy efficiency in buildings, better schools, better. So those are always, we always see consistent demand. And then transportation. We always are outstripped in our funds are, come from the region, through our Strategic Energy Investment Fund, come from the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. We have a fairly robust war chest of resources. But even then, there's never enough in a given year to satisfy all the need. And one of the areas where we're seeing more and more growth is transportation and alternative fuels, particularly from some of them on the infrastructure side, but also which there's other funds that are going to be flowing through our Department of Transportation, working closely with us as the Energy Office. But there's also fleet interest in the vehicles themselves. And we awarded $2 million already this year of local state funds from the Strategic Energy Investment Fund, but there's much more interest. So I think those are going to be some of the items we see most. I think some of the smaller communities are also going to have an interest in residential facing programs and also community and main street types of programs that actually get out there and help bolster bolster their economy while improving the overall services that their community offers.
Great, terrific. Thanks, Eric. Those are some really good ideas. I will open the floor for any questions for Eric or Audrey or me about the program basics that we shared. I did want to elevate one question that came through the chat from Ann Harmon about whether there are beneficiaries designated as in other parts of the Infrastructure Act. For EECBG, as far as I can tell, no, based on the ESA 2007 authorizing language. It does specify uses as well as the eligible entities to receive the funds. But there is the Justice 40 plan, which President Biden has put forth, which aims to ensure that at least 40% of federal investments benefit disadvantaged communities. And I know the specific definitions of what a benefit is and what a disadvantaged community is. There's some interim guidance that the administration has put out, but not final guidance on that yet. However, states might want to think about under EECBG and other funds within IIJA, how the Justice 40 vision might impact the way you think about how the funds go out and who benefits from them. And I just wanted to make sure that that's responsive to your question, or if I'm misinterpreting, feel free to weigh in.
Yeah, and Sandy, if I could even add to that, in the electric vehicle infrastructure funds, there have actually been some maps established that would help SEOs be able to make clear, determine specifically what areas of a state would be eligible. I don't know if we're going to see anything like that under ECBG, but as you said, I think keeping a keen eye on what's in Justice 40 will give us some pointers as to what we may see. And this is an incredibly important area. I think we're all trying to figure out how best to do it.
Great, thanks. Thanks for that extra insight. We did have another question come in from Lloyd. Lloyd, would you care to share it directly? I don't know that I have the answer, but maybe some of the state energy offices around the room have thought about this question of how to sort of integrate the EECBG funds potentially with other streams of funding, like the 500 million for schools.
Yeah, I guess my question is sort of more about, do we have any intel at this stage of how maybe that 500 million is going to look different from a distribution and purpose standpoint, even though it's a discrete, kind of call a subsector. I know that schools were a target of EECBG in the past. So I guess the question is, how do we think the tandem might operate?
Great question. And not to call anyone in particular out, but I know Ed Carley on our team here at NASEO has been looking into the school's provisions. Ed, I'm not sure if you have any thoughts there.
Yeah, sorry, I was finishing lunch, so y'all can hear me, I think.
Yep, we can hear you. Thanks, Ed.
Great. It's one of those days you have to squeeze it in where you can, right? Lloyd, good question. And one we've been grappling with. Our consistent messaging on the schools front has been that this is, so $500 million is not enough to make a big difference, considering that more than half of American schools, public schools, need significant investment. So I think the name of the game is going to be in finding ways to bring these sources of federal funds together and multiply the impact. So both bringing together IIJA funds, EECBG funds through IIJA, and American Rescue Plan Act funds, state energy plan funds, or excuse me, state energy program funds, if that's appropriate in each state, and public-private partnerships like energy service performance contracting. The challenge with the schools program is that some of these schools that are targeted are going to be smaller schools, smaller districts in rural areas. And we're working on trying to figure out model programs. One that we often point to is a program out of Kentucky back in the ARA era. You can find a case study of that on NASEO's website and also on EPA's website. Essentially, they in the ARA days, Kentucky found a way to fund shared school energy managers across a number of districts. And well, in some cases, they were shared across districts. In some of the larger districts, they just served the one. But it allows multiple districts to combine their resources to obtain a service that they might not have been able to afford otherwise. So I think, coming back to your question, I think EECBG can be used to support things like that shared energy manager program. And that shared energy manager can then serve as sort of a mission controller, bringing together all the different players, whether it's ESCOs or other sources of federal funding. They can also provide some expertise that the schools do not have on managing federal funds, and particularly managing federal Department of Energy funds. Those are challenges, and schools don't get a lot of federal funding, and they certainly don't get a lot from the Department of Energy. But stay tuned. We're going to try and develop some model programs, and I hope that that was responsive to your question.
Yes, it was. Thank you.
And actually, if I could give a little plug for a model we just launched that may be something to consider is Maryland just launched what we're calling Decarbonizing Public Schools. And what we were doing under this program, and Ed and I have been chatting about it, is we are providing basically the resources to help what are called LEAs, which are essentially school districts, local education authorities, are essentially school districts, to bring the resources on board to be able to start aggregating their utility data, analyzing it, using it, and then also to be able to incorporate concepts like net zero. And it could, the same principle could apply for just for energy efficiency projects as well, into their long-term capital plan. So we're providing that support to get them ready, get the resources in place so that they can help them identify projects that could be candidates for future federal funding.
Great. Thanks, Eric. Any other questions, comments, thoughts? Okay. A couple of more slides, if you'll bear with us. We did want to touch on some potential future meeting topics that we'd like to cover with you. And we're really interested in everybody's feedback and whether there's a way we can prioritize certain topics over others, depending on what you feel is most important. So one that we do have confirmed already, so please don't deprioritize it, is this question around procurement perspectives and questions. E for the Future has developed a relationship with Dan Kelly, who's a partner at McCarter English, who has deep expertise in the Buy America provisions and can help navigate some of those pieces. Audrey or Pat or Andrew, I'm not sure if you wanted to add any more detail on that front, but I think it's a good topic that we should begin unpacking as soon as we can.
Hi, this is Pat. I'll just say that we, just as with today, there's a lot that is not knowable because of the need for new regulations in response to IIJA. But I think Dan Kelly will be able to provide a lot of context for those of us who have not had to deal with Buy American, and we'll be able to answer questions, and we'll be able to take intake to make sure that we're paying attention and letting you know as the process, regulatory process goes forward, that we're keeping you updated as we learn more.
Great. Thanks, Pat. Another topic we've been exploring is concerns and perspectives about the supply chain and workforce. We know that these Buy America provisions will increase the need for American-made products and there's definitely concerns that the level of manufacturing and product volume here in the US may not meet the needs of IIJA or EECBG, depending on where states and locals decide to focus their investments. One topic for a potential future meeting is to invite private sector partners to talk about what they see as the lay of their land, and how they're trying to sort of prepare both the supply chain and the workforce to help meet the goals of the states and the federal government under the Infrastructure Act. And then finally, this Davis-Bacon and prevailing wage compliance question. So we know that there's a lot of reporting and administrative needs on the back end. So we're hoping to elevate some examples of ways that states can streamline and manage that process, whether it's working through vendors, which we're in the process of exploring the different vendors that provide these types of services, or working in-house to make sure that these different provisions, as well as the overall reporting and tracking, is done well and effectively, and hopefully without too much administrative burden. So that's kind of a quick sketch of some of the meeting topics that we've been thinking about. We're definitely open to other ideas. As David mentioned earlier, we have great relationships with the National League of Cities and the National Association of Counties. So we're happy to try to bring them in to share about city and county perspectives, or any other aspects of this that you think would be valuable for your work. So I will leave the floor open for anybody who might want to share.
Sandy, we've got another question in the chat from Sumesh.
Oh, great.
And I can contribute, but I think Tim Unruh also has a lot of thoughts about this subject. But the question is, can someone shed some light on the use of ESHR funds? That's the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Program. It's in the neighborhood of $176 billion over 3 coronavirus relief bills. The ESHR funds that have been allocated to schools already, and how they may be used with IIJA / EECBG or other funds for energy efficiency and other renewable energy projects for schools. So ESHR covers a very broad number of eligible projects. Among them are HVAC updates that will improve indoor air quality. So we're hearing a lot, and again, Tim may have more to say on this, but we're hearing a lot that schools have a couple of challenges here. So in some cases, they're just buying new HVAC equipment and installing it with no consideration of any changes in occupancy, whether that's an increase or a decrease in student populations, or to its impacts on energy use. And obviously that is not a great outcome if you're trying to improve the efficiency of schools. So we also see concerns about the timeline for completing those capital projects. I think that there's fairly tight turnaround, and there's concerns about supply chain impacting their ability to get the equipment. And if the supply chain doesn't cause the problem, then potentially getting labor causes the problem. So all that said, we do see ESHR funds as a potential source of other federal funds that can be braided together with IIJA money to increase the impact. And I see Tim's unmuted, so I'm going to let him jump in too.
Yeah, so the ESHR funds, the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Funds, that is being used by schools. There is some concern over the time frame of the spending of that fund, and we have made an application back over to Department of Education to extend the time frame for that, and I'm not sure what the status is of that. But Ed was pretty accurate in his description of the overall fund. About 15 to 20% of that fund's been used for building improvement, while the remainder of the ESHR funds have primarily gone towards other educational improvements. I also sent a link in the chat where EPA at 10 o'clock this morning announced a new Clean Air in Buildings program. It's from the White House, and the White House is out pushing agencies to help fulfill this. and they want to use some of the unspent money with ESHR and focus it on facilities to help improve the air in facilities and schools. My guess is other IIJA as well as ARPA funds will also be requested to spend this, whatever's left, to try to improve some building efforts. It's part of President Biden's Get Back to Work plan that he announced in his State of the Union address. Does that help you, Ed, or would you want some more information?
That was great, Tim. Thank you. I'm also going to use this opportunity to plug a survey that we sent out to directors, I think last Friday, where we're trying to gather more information about the technical assistance available to schools from state energy offices. And that's to inform a project that NASEO is working on, funded by DOE to increase access to healthy and efficient schools across the country. So if you're interested in learning more about that, or if you need me to resend that survey to you, just give me a shout. I'll put my email in the chat, but I think most people know how to get a hold of me.
Great. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Tim. And thank you, Sumesh, for the question. It sounds like there is a lot of interest in the schools area. So feel free to speak up if that also applies to you and you're interested in more resources on that topic. The last slide I wanted to walk through is sort of elevating some of the needs that state energy offices have over the next few months, other than those sort of meeting topics that we've already sketched out. NASEO and E4 are in the background developing resources and program models that we hope can help elevate some good ideas for state and local collaboration. And we're really interested in whether there are certain project types or technologies that you all are focused on. Also, would love to hear about any insights or ideas that you all are stewing on in your own states that we should be sharing with the group. We'd like to encourage this kind of discussion and also be on the lookout for anything that we might need to flag to DOE as they develop guidance potentially, just to make sure that there's alignment between what the state energy offices are thinking and the direction that DOE might be taking this. And then finally, just to flag a few program models that NASEO and E4 have begun to sketch out. One is Smart Communities Plan First. E4 has taken the lead on this, interviewing a couple of states that have programs that support local sustainability and clean energy planning directly. We think that there's a lot of value in supporting that kind of work and helping locals build capacity and interest in that area. We've also heard about innovative financing for energy efficiency and resilience potentially being another area of focus under EECBG funds, really helping state energy offices think about how to weave in EECBG funds in a more impactful way for their financing programs, to Eric's point earlier. And then finally, some of the specific technology areas that we know are important, not only in EECBG, but in the Infrastructure Act and state programs and policy areas in general, including schools, manufactured housing, water and wastewater, rural energy issues, and electric vehicles. Please consider the remainder of this meeting sort of open discussion. We're really interested in hearing about what questions you might have and how we can make sure that we're meeting your expectations and needs over the coming months. Oh, and I see there was a question from Megan Grant. Would workforce development and energy efficiency be covered by this, training people to be energy auditors for residential and commercial buildings? So that's a great question. There is actually a separate provision in the Infrastructure Act for training for building energy auditors. And Ed, I'm not sure if you want to speak to that as well. I know it's your area in some fashion, so we can also provide some resources that we've developed on that front.
Yeah, I was just looking for my building committee presentation from back in December and just found it because there's a specific provision actually for training energy auditors. And so section 40503 of the Infrastructure Act, it's Energy Auditor Grant Training Program, $40 million competitive program, $40 $40 million over 5 years. It's no more than $2 million per state, but it is specifically intended to support workforce development for energy auditors. So yeah, Megan, if you're interested, I can connect you to Maddie Kohler, who's been our point person on that part of the bill. But yeah, there's definitely money to help achieve that. And if your state did not win or apply for one of those competitive grants, did not get it in the first or second year, I think you could also use EECBG funding to provide training. So it's a great flexible source of funds. Hope that was responsive to your question.
Thank you, Ed. And this is rewinding a little bit, but I know there was a question in the chat about Justice 40 resources. We shared a few links, especially from administration resources, but we do have a NASEO affiliate partner here in the room with us, Elena with Elevate Energy, which has been offering Justice 40 Accelerator for underserved communities. And Elena, I'm not sure if you'd like to speak to that or offer any further insights from what Elevate has learned on that front.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So I can give a quick background of Justice 40 Accelerator, and I'm happy to connect anyone interested in learning more to those who are on the ground working with these communities. So Elevate and other 5 or nonprofit organizations nationwide have developed a program to prepare community organizations, so community-based organizations, frontline community-based organizations to get ready to apply for federal funding. So this has been done through a suite of different services, including providing small grants to these communities to build capacity and identifying projects suitable for potential federal funding, and getting kind of them ready to apply. So this has been very successful so far on the relationship nationwide with the organizations. There's been a first cohort of organizations last year, basically the last, I think more than 6 months ago. The 52 organizations are part of the first cohort who is receiving these type of services, and there's going to be another cohort soon. So again, I'm happy to connect anyone interested in learning more to those who are working on it.
Thank you so much, Elena. And then I also see Dan Riley with the Vermont Energy Investment Corporation on the line. Daniel, I'm not sure if you'd like to unmute and chat a little bit about the work that you all are doing, but it's also been really valuable, I think, for EECBG and state local planning understanding.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. We've just been working to put together some model programs and some ideas, obviously working with the same constraints that were outlined at the top of the meeting. The big one is that we did use a mix of ESHR and other COVID relief funds to put together a school indoor air quality grant program here in Vermont, where we worked with over 300 schools to do indoor air quality improvements. I will put my email in the chat, and I'm happy I know we only have about 3 minutes left, and I could talk about this program for a long time. So I'm happy to put my email in the chat, and have anybody please reach out. And I'm more than happy to show you what we did here in Vermont.
Thanks so much, Dan. Yeah, it sounds like maybe a joint meeting between this group and our buildings committee is in order to help unpack some of the school's work. It sounds like there's a lot of interest there. Okay, any final comments, questions, insights? Okay, well, thank you all so much for taking the time to join today's meeting. We hope it provided some good foundational information. And thank you to my co-presenters, Audrey, Eric, David, and Pat, as well as we navigate this this journey for EECBG. David, Pat, any final words before we part?
No final words, but thank you, everybody, and thanks for being flexible and working with us and offering your questions and ideas.
All right, wonderful. We'll have a wonderful day, everybody. Thank you again.